The morning sun filtered through the bedroom curtains, casting a soft glow on the empty side of the bed where Leah Clark had once shared her nights. She stared at her phone, scrolling through the unanswered calls and messages she had sent to Nathan, her husband. Each "call me, please, and I need to talk" sat unopened, unread, a silent confirmation of the betrayal she had long feared but never wanted to face. Nathan Clark, a man she had loved with her whole heart, had chosen someone else. The realization struck with cold precision. He wasn't just distant, he wasn't just distracted, he had fully committed to Vanessa, his mistress, leaving Leah and their unborn child to exist as mere afterthoughts. The panic that had bubbled inside her over the past weeks now settled into a grim certainty. Leah's mind replayed the signs she had ignored, the secret of texts, the unusual absences, the soft lies that had once seemed harmless. Everything made sense now, yet the clarity brought no comfort. She felt a bitter cocktail of anger, grief, and disbelief, her hand instinctively resting on her growing belly. The life within her was innocent, yet already caught in the crossfire of her husband's selfishness. She rose from the bed slowly, deliberately. Tears threatened, but she refused to give him that satisfaction. This was not a moment for confrontation, for begging, or for emotional surrender. It was a moment for choice, and Leah had made hers. She would vanish. She would cut contact completely, ignore his calls, and disappear from the life Nathan had assumed he controlled. Not for revenge, not for punishment, but to reclaim herself, her dignity, and her child's future. As Leah packed a small bag quietly, her resolve hardened. Nathan had chosen Vanessa, but Leah would choose herself, and no one, not even the man she had once trusted most, could stop her. The first step of her new life had begun. Leah Clark remembered the early days with Nathan as if they had happened yesterday. They met at a small business conference, two ambitious minds drawn together by laughter, shared goals, and a spark that promised more than fleeting romance. Nathan had impressed her with his vision, his charm, and a confidence that felt protective rather than arrogant. Leah, cautious but hopeful, found herself believing in a future they could build together. Their marriage began with optimism. Long nights spent planning, small celebrations of victories, and whispered promises of forever filled the early years. Leah willingly made sacrifices, supporting Nathan as he expanded his business, often putting her own comfort and personal ambitions aside. She believed in partnership, shared effort and mutual respect, and she trusted Nathan completely. Pregnancy had been meant to deepen their bond. Leah had imagined a husband eager to protect, to nurture, and to celebrate the life they had created together. She pictured Nathan's hand on her belly, his eyes soft with wonder and anticipation. Instead, she began noticing subtle shifts. He became distracted, irritable, and distant. Meetings lasted longer, excuses multiplied, and his attention seemed perpetually drawn elsewhere. Then came Vanessa. At first, it was harmless, just another colleague, another connection. Nathan spoke of her casually, laughed at her jokes, and, unknowingly to Leah, allowed her presence to intrude on spaces that had once been theirs alone. The lies were small, easily dismissed, extra hours at work, late-night calls, and business trips that coincided with unusual absences. Leah had wanted to trust, to believe in Nathan's loyalty. But trust requires reciprocity, and slowly, insidiously, Nathan's choices revealed a truth she could no longer ignore. The man who had promised her forever had already begun rewriting their story, one deception at a time. And yet, she did not react immediately. She felt the betrayal growing quietly in her chest, waiting for the moment when clarity would demand action, a moment that had now arrived. The moment Leah decided she could no longer trust Nathan, a quiet determination took hold. She would not plead, argue, or beg. She had learned over the months that his promises were hollow and that his attention could be bought with charm and convenience, but not earned through respect. This time, she would act on her own terms. She began planning meticulously. First, she stopped answering his calls. Each ignored ring was a small act of liberation, a message that she would no longer be available at his convenience. Texts went unanswered. Emails, social media messages, even passive notifications, all were ignored or deleted. She wasn't just vanishing, she was severing the cords that tethered her to betrayal. The emotional struggle was profound. Part of her longed to hear him explain, to see if even a shred of the husband she once loved remained. But another part, stronger and more insistent, reminded her of the child growing inside her. Every step she took had to protect that life first. Any hesitation or return to his orbit could compromise their safety, their future. Leah's departure was not hasty. She packed only essentials, leaving behind items that bound her to Nathan's world. Photographs, mementos, and gifts became memories she carried in her mind, not in her hands. Every decision was deliberate. She would leave without confrontation, without drama, without giving him the satisfaction of witnessing her pain. As she walked away from the apartment for the last time, a strange combination of fear and exhilaration surged through her. The city around her was indifferent, vast, and full of possibilities. She didn't look back. Nathan had chosen another life, and Leah had chosen her own. For the first time in months, she felt the weight of betrayal lift, replaced by the steady pulse of empowerment. This was not just disappearance, it was reclamation. Every step she took was proof that she could exist, thrive, and protect her child, independent of a man who had betrayed her completely. Leah arrived in a new city under the cover of ordinary routines, blending in quietly while carving a space that was entirely her own. She secured a modest but comfortable apartment, one that felt safe, peaceful, and fully under her control. Every corner, every choice in decoration, reflected her independence, a life built without reliance on Nathan or anyone who had tried to dictate her future. Financial stability became her foundation. Leah found work that challenged her intellect and rewarded her effort, not just her presence. She learned to manage her finances carefully, building savings and investments for herself and her unborn child. Each decision reinforced a growing truth: she did not need Nathan's wealth or status to thrive. Her pregnancy, once a source of anxiety, became a symbol of strength. Each movement of her child reminded her of her purpose and her ability to endure. She embraced the physical changes, nourishing herself with care and mindfulness, turning vulnerability into empowerment. Friends she had known from before reached out cautiously, offering support without judgment. Through them, Leah rebuilt a social circle grounded in authenticity rather than obligation. Emotionally, she developed a resilience that Nathan could never have anticipated. She allowed herself to feel pain but refused to dwell in it. Every setback was met with reflection, planning, and resolve. Leah understood that independence was not simply leaving Nathan, it was creating a life where his choices could no longer touch her. As weeks turned into months, her confidence grew. She learned to navigate her new routines with ease, making decisions that honored her values, her safety, and her child's future. Leah Clark was no longer a wife defined by betrayal, she was a woman defining her life on her own terms. Each morning, as she looked at the skyline or felt her child move, she knew she was building a legacy of strength, autonomy, and unwavering self-respect. Nathan Clark woke to a growing unease he could no longer ignore. Leah's absence was not a temporary silence, not a petty protest he could dismiss with charm or excuses. Her calls went unanswered, messages were ignored, and social media showed no trace of her daily life. The woman who had once been a constant presence, the anchor in his world, had vanished. Panic mingled with disbelief. At first, he told himself it was temporary. She would call back. She would forgive him. But as hours became days, and days stretched into weeks, Nathan realized the gravity of what he had done. He had chosen Vanessa publicly and decisively, assuming Leah would remain tethered by love, habit, and the pregnancy. But she had proven otherwise. His calls became frantic, attempts to manipulate her into responding more desperate. Texts alternated between pleas, apologies, and thinly veiled threats. He even considered sending mutual friends to reach her, believing some connection could bring her back. Yet with each failed attempt, frustration mounted. He was losing control, something he had never experienced before. Meanwhile, Vanessa began to notice cracks in the illusion Nathan had built around their affair. She had believed herself to be the center of his world, the escape from responsibility he had longed for. Now, Nathan's obsession with Leah's disappearance made her uneasy. The woman he had left behind had become a force neither of them could ignore. Chloe, Vanessa, realized that no affair, charm, or wealth could secure permanence against someone with such resolve. Socially, Nathan began facing subtle consequences as well. Friends, colleagues, and even business partners whispered about his failure to maintain stability in his personal life. Where he had once been seen as untouchable, doubt and critique replaced admiration. In solitude, Nathan finally understood a truth he had ignored: wealth, influence, and charm could never substitute for respect, trust, or the loyalty of someone who chose integrity over him. Leah's absence was no longer just physical, it was a mirror reflecting the life he had thrown away. For the first time, Nathan Clark confronted the reality that choosing a mistress over his pregnant wife was a choice he could never undo, and that some consequences were permanent. Nathan's life, once orderly and predictable, began to unravel in ways he hadn't anticipated. Friends and family noticed Leah's absence almost immediately. Questions that had once been polite and infrequent became pointed and persistent. People whispered about Nathan's choices, his affair with Vanessa, and the disappearance of the woman he had publicly vowed to protect. At work, colleagues exchanged glances and cautious comments. Nathan's reputation as a decisive, composed businessman began to erode. Where once he had commanded respect, there was now doubt. A few influential associates discreetly distanced themselves, concerned that the personal drama might reflect poorly on the company. Even minor missteps in meetings were magnified, the contrast between his personal failings and professional persona impossible to ignore. Vanessa, initially thrilled by the affair, grew uneasy as Nathan's obsession with Leah's absence intensified. The charm and confidence that had drawn her in now seemed hollow. He would check in obsessively, ask about mutual contacts, and second-guess her every word. She realized she was participating in a drama she could never control, one that centered not on her desires but on Nathan's growing panic and vulnerability. Meanwhile, Leah observed from a distance, untouched by gossip or scrutiny. Her life, newly structured around independence and preparation for motherhood, flourished quietly. She watched as Nathan struggled to maintain an image he once took for granted, fully aware that every failed attempt to contact her only solidified her control. The social consequences were small yet significant. Invitations ceased, subtle criticisms surfaced, and Nathan's influence waned in circles where he had once been untouchable. The man who believed he could escape accountability realized too late that absence carries power. By the time weeks passed, it was clear, Leah's disappearance had done more than protect her, it had redefined Nathan's world. Reputation, relationships, and respect were no longer his to command. And Leah, standing firmly outside the chaos, remained untouched, her life moving forward with quiet dignity and undeniable strength. Months after vanishing, Leah Clark entered a new phase of life, one defined by both anticipation and empowerment. The pregnancy she had once feared would expose her vulnerability now became a source of inner strength. Each flutter, each kick reminded her that she was creating life on her own terms, without compromise or interference from Nathan or anyone who had underestimated her resolve. She gave birth in a secure, carefully chosen environment, surrounded by supportive friends and professionals who respected her choices. The experience was transformative. Holding her child for the first time, Leah understood the true depth of her resilience. She had faced betrayal, public humiliation, and uncertainty, yet she had emerged intact, powerful, and fully present for the life she now held in her arms. Financial and personal independence became inseparable from her role as a mother. Leah built routines that protected both herself and her child, from carefully managed childcare to financial planning. She established a stable home, a sanctuary of safety and calm. Each choice she made reinforced her autonomy and her capacity to thrive without relying on the very man who had once controlled her life. Emotionally, Leah flourished. She processed the pain of betrayal without letting it define her. Therapy, reflection, and the support of trusted friends allowed her to confront anger and grief without succumbing to bitterness. She learned that strength wasn't about revenge, it was about self-possession, courage, and unwavering clarity in one's priorities. Nathan remained a distant figure, a reminder of the life she had left behind, but he no longer held power over her heart or decisions. The emptiness his absence created was filled by her own sense of purpose, love for her child, and the vision of the future she was shaping. By the time Leah looked at her newborn, she understood the full magnitude of her journey. Betrayal had been a catalyst, not a prison. The woman who had once been abandoned now stood unshakable, empowered, and ready to define her life entirely on her own terms. Motherhood was no longer a vulnerability, it was her greatest strength. Months after disappearing, Leah Clark chose the moment to reappear, not out of anger, but with quiet, undeniable authority. She didn't storm into Nathan's life with accusations or drama. Instead, she moved deliberately, ensuring that her presence conveyed strength, not desperation. Every gesture, every word, demonstrated control that Nathan could no longer challenge. When they met, it wasn't a confrontation in the traditional sense. Leah spoke calmly, asserting boundaries rather than pleading for acknowledgement. She reminded Nathan that the life he had once taken for granted, the love, trust, and stability she had provided, was no longer his to claim. Every attempt to justify his choices or explain his absence fell flat. The balance of power had shifted entirely. Nathan's desperation was palpable. The charm and arrogance that had once defined him now seemed hollow. He realized that he had lost more than a wife, he had lost the woman whose integrity and foresight had once guided him. No amount of wealth or manipulation could undo the truth Leah represented. She had built a life independent of him, and she had emerged stronger than he ever expected. Vanessa, once the symbol of his escape, stood silently beside him. Her confidence had faded, replaced by unease. She understood for the first time that her role had always been secondary, a fleeting distraction in a story she could never control. Leah's reappearance was a testament to self-possession. She had reclaimed her narrative, her dignity, and her child's future. Nathan could plead, apologize, or protest, but the power was no longer his to wield. As Leah turned to leave, there was no bitterness, only quiet triumph. She had proven that strength comes not from retaliation, but from reclaiming oneself, standing firm, and refusing to allow betrayal to define the future. The woman Nathan once underestimated was now completely untouchable, and she would never be confined by his choices again. Leah Clark's new life unfolded with a calm certainty that had once seemed impossible. Her mornings began with quiet routines, her child sleeping peacefully nearby, the soft light of dawn spilling across a home she had carefully built. Every detail, furniture, walls, even the smallest decorations, reflected intention, independence, and freedom from the past she had left behind. Motherhood had become a source of empowerment. The child she had carried and protected now gave her purpose beyond survival, it gave her a reason to thrive. Financial stability, emotional resilience, and a carefully cultivated support system surrounded her, forming the framework of a life she had designed entirely on her terms. Leah no longer measured herself against Nathan, Vanessa, or the expectations of anyone else. Her worth was self-determined, and her decisions reflected her priorities: safety, love, dignity, and growth. Nathan and Vanessa faded into irrelevance. Where once they had been central to her thoughts, they now existed only as reminders of choices she refused to repeat. She felt no desire for revenge, no lingering bitterness, only a quiet, unwavering confidence in her autonomy and in the life she had claimed. Leah walked through her day with a new rhythm, one shaped by intention rather than obligation. Every choice reinforced her independence: the meals she prepared, the walks she took with her child, the work she pursued. Even the smallest successes reminded her that she was no longer tethered to the man who had betrayed her. As she held her child close at night, Leah understood the full magnitude of her journey. She had been abandoned, yes, but she had transformed loss into strength, betrayal into clarity, and fear into empowerment. In the soft glow of the evening, Leah smiled. Her life, her child, her future, they were hers entirely. The woman who had vanished to protect herself had returned not just intact, but radiant, resilient, and unstoppable. She had reclaimed everything the betrayal had threatened to take, and in doing so, she had built a legacy of strength that no one could ever undo.